Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, good to have you with us.
Happy Friday, Dr. Paul. Great to be with you.
Very good. And guess what? We're going to talk a little bit about the Fed and monetary policy and how the Democrats and Biden has straightened all this out. And we're going to be out of work pretty soon. We won't have anything to talk about because he has all these plans on straightening out the economy, and he knows who to blame. But we'll have to wait and see that happens. We're going to hang around, though, for a bit, keeping our eye on it, just in case all his plans don't work. And it is my suspicion that it probably will not work. But it's not Biden alone. Biden is a target, and he is supposedly a leader of movement. But I don't think many people see it that way. But people do pay attention, to policy and what's going on, say, in Ukraine and who's running the war. Now, Biden has more to say about that, it seems, through executive orders and causing trouble. But when it comes to monetary policy on a daily basis, there are some influences that have a lot to say about this. And right now, the big event coming up this past week is they've come up with another solution. We've never heard of it. What we need to do is slow down the money printing and deal with the inflation. So are they going to cut back on the money supply and this sort of thing? Oh, no, we don't have to. We have a better way. We'll just raise the interest rate. And this is unique. They have no real intention, and it would scare the markets if they actually shrunk the balance sheet, or quit increasing the money supply. But they will tinker with interest rates. And they're right to concentrate on interest rates because it's very, very important. It's the destruction of the market rate of interest that has caused so much trouble. But if you just pick that one item out and giving it a narcotic and thinking that, I'll tinker with the interest rate, which is more complicated than that, they're not going to solve the problem, and yet they have tried it. So I think that there's a sincere effort by some, even though there's some debate going on at the Fed. There's a sincere effort because they've all been conditioned. They don't accept the idea that the founders accepted, that Austrian economics teaches, that free markets, profess to believe in. They don't have that because they are interventionists, they're planners, they're economic planners, and besides, it's a little painful doing the right thing now. So now they're doing something in between. They're going to tinker with the monetary base, which won't help much. But the big thing is interest rates are going up, and they agitate over there. If they talked about it, and there have been a few souls at the Fed say you should have done it a long time ago. So that is the thing that's going on right now. But our job today, Chris, is to talk about it and sort of warn some people what's going to happen.
Yes, Dr. Paul, and as a lot of people should know by now, every artificial boom created by the Fed must have a subsequent bust. It's unavoidable. The Fed artificially pushes down interest rates, and that powers a fictional boom. Things look better than they really are. Whoever happens to be president at the time takes credit. It's great economy. He just happened to be president at the time. It's kind of like if you're in a bar and a person who drinks too much, they tend to get a little overconfident. I'm the toughest man alive. Yeah, well, we'll see when the alcohol wears off what you really are. And that's what it's like with the Fed bubbles. Everything seems great. Look at the houses, how much you could sell them for, the stock market. But when interest rates rise and economic reality returns, that's when the truth is exposed. And that's what the Fed does to us over and over, these booms and busts. And this isn't, a fixture of nature that we can't do anything about. This isn't like the Earth revolving around the sun. We can't do anything about that. This is by choice. The Congress did this to us back in 1913. It's unconstitutional, and all current Congresses keep it in place. It is an imposition on us. So we say that's enough of this imposition. We're tired of this roller coaster economy that only serves the wealthy and the politically connected. We say, end the Fed.
Very good. That's a good idea. I wonder where that idea came from, but I think I'll go along with that. You know, there's one member of the Federal Reserve Board, the president of the bank in St. Louis, Bullard, and he says he criticized it. He voted no on this recent effort to increase interest, allow interest rates to go up 0.25%. They've agitated over this for a long, long time, and yet they finally look like they're going to do it. And how long it's going to last is something we want to talk a little bit about, because it will come to an end. It's not going to solve the problem. And Bullard said the interest rate should go up much faster, and to be able to control inflation. So he has a bit of more truth with his statement than the others. Politically, it's not much of a winner. But besides, even with Bullard's technical argument for raising interest rates, because the market actually would raise interest rates, it really isn't anything, to go. But even the Fed now has been badgered into thinking, well, we got to raise them between 25.25, 0.5 immediately, and then there'll be 6 more times they're going to raise interest rates this year. And they're hoping that the markets understand it, and they will respond, because that's the job of the Fed, is to take care of the markets, and they do amazingly well, because if the players in the market were really honest with themselves, they'd say, this is out of control, and whatever the Fed does isn't going to do much good. So they're playing with us, and we'll have to see what happens. But I don't think for a minute that they're anywhere close to having a problem, because they're still involved, with a QE type of operation. They're still holding a lot of treasuries, a lot of mortgage-backed securities, and that's all artificial. It's all inflation, and it's going to continue that way. And I believe that they're in for a shock, that things aren't going to go as well as they want or think, unless somebody's conspiring behind the scenes to want it to happen, because there are some elements in the world that want things to happen because they think they have a better scheme. The problem is we don't have enough inflation. The Pelosi's of the world argue we need more debt and more spending. There are people like that, and some have an ulterior motive. Yes, we can usher in our form of socialism and Marxism when things become chaotic. And Chris, I would say so far, looking at this particular week and what we can anticipate in the near future, chaos is coming. If the group wants that, they're going to have their way, and that will be very unfortunate for the people, because right now they're hurting, because they're receiving the brunt of all this nonsense by paying for everything with higher prices. And as long as we continue on this process and raise interest rates, maybe 0.25, it's not going to stop the inflation. And the inflation is the evil, and I'm talking about the price inflation. I always want to make a difference between prices going up being the final answer of what is inflation. We have to always think about Federal Reserve inflation, the creation of money and credit out of thin air. That's what has to be dealt with.
Right, and I think you're right about the economic catastrophe. They started raising. This is the first time in 3 years, I believe, and they don't know how far they can go. You mentioned, and I think it was Bullard, at 6 times. They really don't know. When it comes to the market, there's the talk and then there's the reality. It's the same thing with what we went through with COVID. There was all the talk about COVID and COVID and COVID, and then there was the reality of the situation. And it's the same with the war. If you go online and look at the media, there's all the talk about this war. And then when you look at other media, you think, the reality might be a lot different. What happens is our authorities and the media, they convince themselves in the talk, and they think that they could avoid reality. So the Fed and the media, I'm sure, will say they have this under control. The market, they're pricing in all the interest rate hikes. There's nothing to worry about. But that's not how it works. There's a lag time. It's not like they're going to raise rates today and everything falls apart in 2 hours. That's not how it works. There's a lag time with all the interest rate rises and how it affects the economy. They're trying to control the uncontrollable. It is absolutely impossible to do what they're doing. But they talk themselves into their own propaganda, and they believe it. And then all of a sudden, the house of cards falls apart, and everybody says nobody saw it coming. That's just how it works. The thing is, we can't just keep doing this over and over. This is not a simple up and down, perpetual thing that the Fed has going, because every down is worse than the previous down. 2008 was worse than 2000. 2008, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, these big trillion-dollar financial institutions, or close to trillion, went under completely and gone. And now we are, 12, 14 years later, and it's much worse than 2008. So this is not a simple up and down thing that the Fed can just do forever. It's going to keep getting worse and bigger and worse and more painful. We keep telling them, Dr. Paul especially, for all these years, stop. But they do not stop. They think they can control the uncontrollable, but reality will win in the end.
Chris, you make a real important point. You were talking about the different cycles that we go through. In order to take care of the next cycle, it has to be, more debt and more inflation just to keep it going. It builds on itself, and everyone gets worse, and this is the case. So the one thing, 2018, there were a lot of people who were saying, and things were bad then, but they're much worse now. And they did raise interest rates for over a year. They were raising interest rate and cut back on QE and this sort of thing. So they were doing that, but then all of a sudden the markets didn't do well, and it was probably around a year plus or so that finally the Fed caved in, and they went back to inflating again. And but since that time, since 2019, the central banks are in collusion, because we have the dollar, we have the reserve currency. So even if they're inflating, that has to deal with their reserves and what the dollar's doing. But since 2019, the balance sheets of 4 countries went up over $11 trillion. That's a lot of monetary inflation. The 4 countries, everybody knows who we work with the closest and who are most aligned with our system, and that's Japan and European Union and England, plus our central bank. So together, but really the ringleader is the group that has the control of the reserve currency of the world. But that's another story we've talked about, and we can mention it, and that's the big difference that's going on right now. Credibility is being lost constantly, whether it's on foreign policy, economic policy, and on this monetary policy. And then when you think about who the current elected leaders are, people are losing confidence, and they're getting pretty upset. And they're not reaching out because they're reaching out with more of the same. The people are still in that mode with saying, yes, we have inflation, prices are too high, we need more money to pay the bills. And that's not going to solve the problem. That just delays it. But the way you described, Chris, about each episode getting worse, that's why I like to use the example of drug addiction, because the longer you're on drugs, the higher the dose has to be. And that's exactly what is happening with monetary inflation. And then it gets reached to the breaking point, and we must be awfully close, where you can't do anything about it. See, even if Bullard had his way, and he decided to just double everything the Fed is going to do anyway, no, it's going to crash the market. So there is no easy solution on this. So the politician is incapable of doing it, even if he tries. The best I always thought we could do is to present the case for why we're doing it, why it's so bad, what the real answer is, and it's really the prevention of this problem. We need to prevent these problems. You know, somebody says, how would you manage the war in Ukraine? I don't want to manage the war in Ukraine. I don't want the war in Ukraine. And if we followed the rules, we wouldn't be in Ukraine. But no, the monetary system and the mentality that we have says we have to be there to save the world. It's our empire. And, NATO's at stake. If we don't do this, NATO will be undermined. So this is a challenge that we have, and so the solution I always go back to: you have to change policy, and you have to get the people to have some basic understanding of it. But if the leadership in the country and the financial communities, our universities, our economic professors, had sort of a similar understanding, which they had in the beginning of our history, because they basically believed in sound money. For years, the dollar was defined as a weight in gold, and it was all the way up until 1971 is when we declared the currency bankruptcy, that we would no longer honor the dollar with something of real value, the gold. So it did last and can last, and there are examples in history where governments have kept and stayed on a commodity money, and they did quite well, and the economies did well as just as well as ever before without the commodity money.
Right, Dr. Paul, very good. I'm going to close up by saying there has to be a bust, and it has to be worse than the previous bust. It's just how it is. It's not something that any of us want. The Fed doesn't know what it's doing. All the authorities trick themselves into believing their own lies. And then they impose policies that are going to hurt us on us. So what on earth are we supposed to do? There's no simple answer to that, unfortunately. We can't say, okay, everybody do this, because we all live in our own worlds, wherever we happen to be. We're all different. Our situations are different. We can't say, okay, everybody buy this and everything will be okay. Even something as great as gold, things are not going to be okay. We have to each deal with our personal situations in the best way that we could. One thing we can do, though, is not be like the authorities, like the media. If they're all saying, everybody go left, it's time to think, and it might be time to go right. The crowd is hardly ever right, and the government and the media is hardly ever right. I mean, that's just how it is, at least in modern times, at least with the setup as it is today. And we live in unprecedented times for sure. What we went through with COVID has never happened before on a global scale. With governments, what they have done. There are now pushes for nuclear powers to get into war with one another. These people are insane. So we definitely live in amazing times financially, like what we talk about each week. This is unprecedented. This is a global dollar system that is just ripping apart at the seams. So it's impossible for anybody to say, this is what we'll do, and everything's going to be all right. We just have to take each day and think, because everybody around us is not going to think, or most people, unfortunately, adhere as best as we can to the ideas of liberty, free markets, property rights, treating our neighbor as we want to be treated, and do what is right. And then hopefully, by doing all these things, we could come through, whatever is ahead.
Very good, Chris. We already recognize, and the people are starting to recognize, especially because prices are going up, that things aren't going well. There's a lot of chaos. But we've been saying that this is all predictable. The policies that we have followed will lead to this, living beyond our means and resisting any help from the marketplace by knowing what interest rates should be, pretending that we know all these things. So the Democrats have a slightly different viewpoint on this, but at other times, the two parties come together. But in particular, the Democrats put more emphasis on taxes. That way we can tax people who are still rich and pass it out, and in order for people to sort of catch up on the high prices. And they love regulations. They love emphasis on environmentalism, in spite of all the problems that the radical environmentalists have created, and the pressure they put on Biden and others to close down the production of energy and the pipelines necessary to do what it has done for 100 years or even more. Ever since we had oil, we've had these pipelines. You ought to see what Texas looked like when you come to pipeline. There'd be no Texas without pipelines. But the environmentalists and the Democrats want to do this, and all this is done. Everything they suggest, which many Republicans go along with, decreases production, which gives us a bigger problem. And it is not surprising that the president has said what we need to do is, Russia wants to sell, gas to Germany. I thought, well, that sounds a pretty good idea. It's cheaper that way. They live closer, and countries that trade with each other generally aren't supposed to fight with each other. But we're still a powerhouse. We have the reserve currency. So we badgered Germany to go along with us, the United States, to say, well, we don't want that pipeline. Just because, a company in Russia was the major builder of this pipeline. To me, it's a magnificent thing that they can run this pipeline from Russia to Germany and give them cheaper gas. And you'd say, well, that's good. It's good for the consumer, but it's not good for the oil producers in the United States. So they come up with this weird program, destroy the production of oil in this country, and then there comes up shortages, and then you go and a company that might be producing oil, we have to be jealous of them and say, Russia's shouldn't be allowed to do that. Don't you know they're a bunch of communists? And here they're outdoing us in some areas as well as China's, and with some of the capitalistic things that they do, and they become pretty strong competitors. So that is annoying. So Biden, which is amazing to me, that he, with a stroke of a pen, can close down that whole pipeline. Billions of dollars already spent, and it's close to being completed. And he says, close it down. And that was done because he was able to badger Germany into cooperating, and Germany was on the receiving end of this. And so they're doing this. They've literally been able to close this down. But the next thing was Biden proposed that we quit giving favorable trade status with Germany, with Russia and Belarus, and that'll solve the problems because they're doing all these things. They've brought chaos to the world, so they have to punish Russia. So they want to put these sanctions on them, and the Congress had to respond. The House has already responded. They say, well, yeah, we have to support our president. I mean, he's going to take care of those Russians. So what does he do? They come up with a bill. Republicans and Democrats voted on it, this week, and the vote was to stop all this trading with Russia and Belarus because they turned out to be so evil. But guess what? There's a lot of trading on the side, and there's a lot of things going on with Russia. There's more incentives now for Russia and China to get together. So there's a lot of downside. The biggest downside, it does nothing to lower the price of oil, and it doesn't do anything to help the consumer here in this country, but it looks good. I'm tough on Russia. We're going to put sanctions on them. So they have a vote, and you figure, well, aren't there a bunch of good Republican believers in free enterprise, and they would know better than doing this. This doesn't make any sense, so it doesn't solve the problem. So they have the vote, and the vote comes out. It comes out. It was 200 and excuse me a second. It came out 424 to 8. 8 Republicans voted against this, the good guys. So you could probably figure it out. The good guys said, "No, this is over the top. We're not going to go along with it." But so who did that? Who supported Biden? The guy that the Republicans hate. They vote for this proposal by Biden, and the proposal's making everything worse, raises the prices of things, and then it's so bipartisan. And you wonder, what are they doing? It's sort of like how so many people, not as complete as this, they rolled over and they did whatever the administration said about locking down, telling people that they can't get very close to anybody, and they had to have masks on. That didn't work. And they had economic pressures they put on, and they said, well, if you don't do that, we'll cancel you, and you won't be able to go see your football game, and that sort of thing. So it is a real shame. To me, that vote tells you where the real obstacle goes. So if you get that much resistance for tinkering around and making things worse, and they want it to happen, what would they do if you actually said, well, I think we should have a market rate of interest? And they say, are you crazy? And under today's circumstances, it would be very chaotic. But it's the chaotic situation that would be increased with trying to fix things compared to the chaos that's coming when you have the breakdown of this whole system. And that, unfortunately, is what's coming. So I think there's going to be a reckoning. And the one question I ask about on this program is, how long do we think that this tightening and raising of interest rates, which is sort of just fluff, is not going to do anything? How long will they pretend that they're going to do that? Will they raise interest rates 6 times this coming year? And my answer is probably not. Nobody knows the exact issue or event that's going to precipitate the rout on the stock market, but everything is malinvestment and out of place. The debt is too high, and correction has to come. So I would say I'll be really surprised if the policy even has a modest help, a modest improvement with the economy during the next year. I think something big will happen, and there will be a correction that will be beyond the tinkering of interest rates. And even Bullard has a real serious intent and probably a better grasp of economics. Even if he had total charge of it, unfortunately, we're in such a mess, it's not going to work. I still argue the case. Maybe it's my medical background. Prevention is better than the cure. Prevent these things. Good health and good healthy economies is the way to prevent this. So you could have, a non-interventionist foreign policy. Stay out of the wars. Stay out of the mischief of running people's lives. So you stay out of all this control and monkeying around with COVID, and you would also save the painful disaster of believing that wealth comes out of a printing press, and that if politicians, if they just print more money and pass it out, the economy will grow. Nancy Pelosi believes that. She brags about it. And I say, what is she saying? Indeed, she's third in line. So getting rid of 2 won't do us much good. So anyway, ideas are the only thing that we can resort to. And I think it's the ideas and the positions that so many good people have taken about, the COVID. And nature has helped us too, because there's been some, natural immunity build and things are better off. But I don't know where the natural immunity is going to come to curtail the activities of the politician. That's probably what we really need. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.